Hello, thank you for being in a new video. This time we have a mini review of the realme C61. Let's get started. I decided to do a mini review because I must anticipate you that at this price I am not going to recommend it if you want a realme. This device is going to be too similar to the Realme Note 60, which costs 1,000 pesos less. The launch price of this model is 4,499 pesos in Mexico. That is more or less $225. So it is $50 difference approximately, and really we will not find so many differences between this device and its younger brother, so I'm practically going to tell you the small differences with respect to that model because the rest of features are exactly the same. Even their distributors are exactly the same. So in this case, there is not even a difference in that some are distributed online and others in physical stores. Showing me to know the differences. In design, obviously here we will find the biggest differences, although the front may look very similar. On the sides, we already begin to see a little difference, especially in color. Since in this case I have the edition in gold color, but there is also an edition in green color, we find fingerprint reader, although the rest of the features are the same. In fact, in the back cover, we will also find aesthetic differences, but that is only aesthetic difference. Here we will find a small acrylic surrounding the camera module, unlike the Note model. But I insist that basically it is only an aesthetic difference. If I agree that this model is a little nicer, although that is relative. But it seems to me that we all agree that resistance today is a priority in the world of smartphones, and in that sense, this model that is more expensive has less resistance than its brother. For example, this model has IP54. Its brother has IP64. Means that it is more resistant to dust, although they have the same level of water resistance. However, in the Realme Note 60, the manufacturer claims that it has a reinforced body and more things. In fact, if you go check out the review, I put it to the test, threw it around and everything, and it held up pretty well. I'm not going to do the same test on this model because the manufacturer does not assure that it will have the same level of resistance. So speaking specifically of resistance, I would recommend more the model that is cheaper. So I tell you that this is not so attractive to me. In sound and front camera is exactly the same as his brother, then we will not talk much about that. Just tell you that in this price range we can get a little more demanding yet. In the price range of its brother, we could come to accept or forgive some things, but this model is 1,000 pesos more expensive, and it is exactly the same in these sections, so that's why it's not so recommended. Let's go now to talk about the rear camera, which in this case, if there is a major difference, as here integrates a 50 megapixel sensor, although not necessarily by having more resolution, will be better. But if it is a completely different sensor. So join me to see the results of the photographs, as in interface and functions is exactly the same as his brother. So if you want to know its features, I invite you to see this review. Then look at the results of this camera. I think that compared to the Note 60, it gives us more saturation and more sharpness in the image without being an ultra-detailed image. But definitely if you notice a higher quality in the sensor of this camera, if you compare it with his little brother, the previous picture was with the high resolution mode. With the normal mode, we will find a very similar level of detail. Since in fact the high resolution mode is the one that gives us the best image quality. Does not seem to be as spectacular, but as I say, it does give us more sharpness than its brother for macro photography. Note that it also does a good job of maintaining a good level of detail when it is close. And in fact, if you apply a little digital zoom, I think you can get very detailed pictures of small objects. Note that even moving objects are captured with a good quality. In this case, one of the discs was spinning, and anyway, the image comes out well, and although the preview looks burnt, in backlit scenes, the result is much better balanced. So it is a camera that, yes, we could say that rises in level with respect to his brother of the Note family. Although in scenes with more movement, notes that it is not able to compensate well lights and shadows. If overexposed areas will appear because it is a more complicated environment. But notes that even at night we will find a better quality compared to his brother we see lower. It does not show any presence of noise, although in automatic mode it still overexposes the most illuminated areas a lot. However, note that applying the night mode, we are going to find a very good exposure in these more illuminated areas, considering its price range. 1. Noise management sufficiently good, and although it does not have ultra-wide camera, with the panoramic mode, you could achieve this type of photos with more space and have good detail. So in camera, I think it is well. And obviously by having another camera sensor, it will also give us slightly different results in video recording. So let's see more or less what it can offer us. In video recording, we're also going to notice slightly better color capture than its sibling due to the sensor that it uses, which is of better quality, although it doesn't have stabilization anyway. So it's not a high quality video or anything like that. In fact, notice how the zoom at the highest level starts to feel a bit gelatinous and doesn't have as much level of detail. I would say that the maximum zoom that still retains good quality would be more or less 4x, but like its sibling Note, it has no stabilization, and I think that in this price range we could already ask for a little more. Stabilization? So this is definitely a weak point. The video recording doesn't get to be very outstanding. Note that backlit will also have some complications. At times it seems to balance the highlights and shadows a little better. But most of the time, it's going to give preference to lighting the face, sacrificing the shadow area, and overexposes a lot. Although remember that you can turn off face detection, which would allow for a slightly more balanced result. The focus, although it is not too agile, if you have good light conditions, I think it can be adapted in a good way. In that sense, I think it is not too bad. And note that at night, it is definitely superior to its younger brother that gave a rather disastrous result. In this case, while it doesn't pick up as much illumination and doesn't have as much contrast, it's not going to come out too bad. When you're shooting very dark scenes, it's obviously not going to be able to balance highlights and shadows well, but here it's definitely, if you notice, a significant improvement. Fortunately, if it has slow motion, which is simple, but its incorporation is appreciated, there you are seeing the result in HD at 120 frames per second. It also has fast motion, which when walking or recording people is fine in terms of speed, although it does not have stabilization, so it does not give such a spectacular result. It will be best to place it on a base, so it would be good for shooting landscapes, but in this case it has a setting of automatic speed that is quite slow if you want to record landscapes, so it would not be so recommended for that. In the software and security software section is exactly the same as his brother, so we will not spend so much time on this. I invite you to go see that review if you want to know more details. But where we will find a difference will be in the battery section, not necessarily in the duration, because the battery capacity is the same and having the same processor on the same screen, there will be no real difference in battery consumption, so all that is exactly the same, but where there is a difference is in the charging power, which in the Note model is 10 watts. Here is 15 watts. There's a very small increase in my test. In 15 minutes, recovered 15%. That is to say 3% more than its brother, which is cheaper. The difference does not really represent 1,000 pesos or $50. In 30 minutes, it reached 28%, while its brother had remained in 23%. While I'm not sure that his brother had stayed at 22, so the more time goes by, the difference is a little more noticeable. But I do not know if you consider a difference worthy of $50 and up to the 100% there was only 11 min difference, then I do not think it is a difference to consider. In the rest of things of battery functions is the same. In connectivity is practically the same, with a small difference that perhaps you could come to consider worthy of this price difference, and is the incorporation. But it does not have NFC. This means that you could add your credit or debit cards to Google Wallet, for example, so you can pay simply by using your cell phone in compatible banking terminals. And I think that can make a significant difference, although personally I don't like that it keeps practically the same as the cheaper model, with some subtle differences, especially in performance, which we will talk about in a moment. The ecosystem will obviously be the same as the last model, so let's jump now to talk about performance. In this section is where I can criticize it the most, because it retains exactly the same performance as its younger brother, and in this price range we can definitely get much more demanding. We require more RAM, or at least a better processor, but in this case it stagnates a lot, and obviously in games the experience will be exactly the same because it has the same processor, the same RAM and the same screen. So in summary, if you want a realme and you are interested in this, I would recommend more realme Note 60, and on the other hand, if you are looking for a cell phone in this same price range with this budget, definitely there will be better competitors that will offer better sound. Better screen, better cameras. In general, it is a device that really falls very short. I hope you like this video. If so, you know you can tell us, and we'll see you next time.